Awkward dialogue is among the hardest things to write. If you're not careful, you end up with two talking heads saying meaningless stuff, or worse, you could end up having your characters not exactly say what you intended them to. Editomat's dialogue function will help you analyze your dialogue and hopefully improve it. We'll take a look at some good dialogue, and then we'll look at some bad dialogue, and then we'll look at something that's a little bit more like reality. First, we'll take a look at some good dialogue. Sinclair Lewis is considered one of the best dialogue writers in American literature. This is a section from his novel, Babbitt. You may want to pause and just take a look at the dialogue, and then we're going to analyze it. First, we click the dialogue button. When you click the dialogue button, Editomat will analyze the dialogue and assign each set of dialogue to a speaker, and then it highlights the dialogue to show who is speaking. The highlighting makes it easy to read through your document and just scan for an individual character's dialogue. Editomat also opens up a second window where it displays the characteristics of each speaker's dialogue. We'll take a look at those. The first display you'll see is the sentence types. Most characters speak primarily in simple sentences. A character that is more educated may speak in more complex sentences. Here you'll notice that what Sinclair Lewis did was Babbitt speaks with a fair number of compound and complex sentences, but his wife sticks with simple sentences. This display shows us histograms of the sentence lengths, how many sentences of each length the character uses. Notice that Babbitt uses a fair number of long sentences, while his wife is largely restricted to short sentences like, "Yes, dear," and "That's so." The word usage display shows how many times each word gets used. You can sort on each column by clicking to show the count in decreasing order, and again, in decreasing order for Myra. Now you notice that Babbitt calls them pants, while Myra calls them trousers. Using a different vocabulary for each character is one of the ways that Sinclair Lewis distinguishes between Babbitt's and Myra's dialogue. The next display we're going to look at is the content function analysis. You may not be familiar with content function analysis, so we'll do a quick digression. Content function analysis is a relatively recent addition to the way of looking at language. It divides the language into the content words that give a sentence its content, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, the adverbs. This is what the sentence is about. It tells you who does it, where they do it, how fast they do it. And these are words that change a lot. They get added to the language as necessary. For instance, computer, byte, spam didn't exist a few years ago. The other thing is that when we're speaking, content words are the ones that get the inflection. They get stressed, and that's what gives the language its rhythm. The function words are what provide the glue just to hold the sentence together. These are and, the, or. The conjunctions, the articles, pronouns like he, she are function words. These don't change often. The most recent function word change in the English language was when we stopped using thou as a diminutive second-person pronoun. Editomat looks at the first 4 or 5 words in your sentence, depending on the analysis that you're doing. This is enough to give you a feeling for how the sentence is starting. It's what the reader sees first. The bar charts show that Babbitt's dialogue mostly starts with function words, while Myra's dialogue mostly starts with content words. That means that their dialogue has a different rhythm, a different inflection when we read it, so in our inner ear, they will sound different. So that gives us an idea of how Sinclair Lewis distinguished between his two characters' dialogue. Different sentence types, different sentence lengths, different vocabulary, and a different rhythm to the way that each character speaks. Next, we'll take a look at some truly bad dialogue, and we'll see how these same tools will help us improve it. We'll start by running the dialogue button, and first thing you notice is that we have he and unknown, and in fact, 2 lines of dialogue are both ascribed to the same person. Editomat uses some clever AI to assign the speakers to the dialogue, but sometimes it just can't manage it. When Editomat fails, first you should look at your prose to see if a human reader would also have trouble. In this case, even a human couldn't figure out whether Professor Pontificus or Harry the Henchman was talking. We really need to add some dialogue tags to this. So we add Pontificus asked and Harry replied, and that's enough for Editomat to assign the dialogue to the right speakers. Now you can see that Pontificus, Harry, and Peter the policeman are all assigned properly. Now that the assignments are correct, we can do the analysis. First thing we see is that the sentence type for each character is nothing but simple sentences for all of their dialogue. When we look at the sentence lengths, we see that Pontificus uses mostly 4-word sentences, as does Harry the Henchman. Peter the policeman only gets 1 line, but it's not significantly different from how Harry and Pontificus speak. Take a look at the content function. Pontificus and Harry both start their sentences with a couple of function words, and so does Peter. So everybody has the same rhythm in their speech pattern. Let's go back to the dialogue and start fixing it. Pontificus is a curmudgeonly mad scientist. He should talk like one. Should demean his helper. Use longer sentences with subordinate clauses. Start his sentences with content words. Here's the reworked dialogue. Now Pontificus pontificates. Harry uses short, simple sentences. And Peter the policeman is a fake Irishman. When we look at the sentence types, we see that Pontificus is now using a lot of complex and compound sentences, while Harry Henchman is just using simple sentences. When we look at sentence lengths, we see that Pontificus is now using large sentences, Harry the Henchman is using mostly short sentences, and Peter Policeman comes in between the two. When we look at the content function analysis, we see that Pontificus now starts most of his sentences with a content word, an emphasized word. Harry Henchman starts most of his with a functional word, and Peter the Policeman starts his with fate, a content word which is also an expletive. Along with the counts, the word usage diagram can also tell us whether or not the words in a character's dialogues are in a particular set of vocabulary. In this case, we're going to go to the Edit Preferences, open Dialog, and add the basic vocabulary collection. These are words that should be known by a third grader. Now we can rerun the analysis, and when we look in the word usage display, we see there's a new column for basic words. When we sort on this column, it pulls all of the yeses and nos together, the y's and n's. And now we can see that Pontificus mostly uses words that are not in the basic third grader's vocabulary, while Harry the Henchman mostly uses words that are. This short piece has 3 speakers, and to make matters complex, one of them, the sheriff, is identified both as Jake and as Clemson. So that makes life a little bit confusing. But one of the things that we can do is we can do a right-hand click on Clemson, and now we'll get an opportunity to merge all of his dialogue in with Jake's. So that will clean things up. We get the merge. Editomat immediately does reanalysis, and now we see we've just got Slim, Tumbleweed, and Jake speaking. But you'll notice that Tumbleweed's first line is still not right. If we use the extract, it'll pull out all of the dialogue for each character and put them in a separate column. So we can just go through, we can take a look and say, here is Slim's dialogue, here is Tumbleweed's. We take a look at Jake's dialogue, we find the line that starts with dang Slim. With a right click, we can reassign that line to Tumbleweed. Now the dialogue is all correctly assigned. We'll redo the analysis, and now we could go through and actually look at our dialogue and see what we want to change and fix. Fixing the dialogue is left as an exercise for the writer. Initially, Editomat identifies each piece of dialogue by speaker. We can also identify and locate each line of dialogue by type of sentence, sentence length, or by the individual line of dialogue. After we do the initial analysis, we bleach out all of the per speaker highlights and drag over the analysis window. When we left-click on compound, it highlights all of the compound sentences. When we control left-click on one of the bars, Editomat takes us to the next line of dialogue that matches this type. From the extracted dialogue, we can left-click on any line of dialogue, and Editomat will immediately take us to that line of dialogue in the text. Left-clicking these sections of Myra's dialogue takes us to each line of that dialogue and highlights it so we can easily find it. This completes our introduction to Editomat's dialogue features. Editomat can find and identify the speakers, analyzes each speaker's dialogue according to sentence length, sentence type, the rhythm of their speech, and their word usage, and finally it finds and locates individual lines of dialogue to make editing fast and easy. Thank you for watching, and you can always get Editomat from www.editomat.com.